My name is James. I work here at Red Ventures, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about do or do nots with Docker. Now, if you've done a lot of Docker, you probably either know this or disagree with this. This is really geared towards people that are just getting started with Docker, so hopefully there's one or two of you out there. I really wanted to work try, but I couldn't make it happen. I'm not good with puns. I'm going to jump right into don't do stateful things. You heard a lot about Kubernetes making this easier now. Kubernetes totally does. This isn't where you should start your Docker lifestyle. Yeah, there you go. Build your own base images. Don't rely on what's on Docker Hub. You need to control it, just like you need to control your code if you're a coder. Good stuff here. Docker Hub makes this really easy to build images automated off of GitHub and all that fun stuff. Make sure you're doing this and not relying on what the world's giving you. Don't use images that you don't have a Docker file for. And also, check and make sure that the Docker file that's attached to the image is actually the one that's being used. Don't trust that just because someone posted a Docker file, that's what the image is based off of. Really important to also make sure you patch your images. It's an OS. It doesn't have a kernel, but it's an OS. Just like your OSs, you need to make sure you're patching them to keep them secure. Super important. A lot of people don't necessarily realize that. Automate all of this. You're going to be building lots of images. You're going to be patching lots of things. Nobody wants to do that manually. And usually if it's done manually, it's not going to get done. So make sure you're doing automation with this along with the rest of your CI/CD pipeline. One process per container. Don't try and run Apache and SQL Server, MySQL in the same container. You're not going to have a good time. You're doing a lot of bad things if you're doing that. So you run them separate, read Docker Compose and how that stuff works. It'll help you out with that. Always specify the version for your base image when you're going to production. If you're playing around, you can use latest. In production, don't use latest. It'll get you into trouble. Stuff will end up there you didn't expect. Things will stop working. You won't really like it that much. Scan for vulnerabilities in your pipeline just like you do normally. You gotta make sure that what you're shipping is secure. Container and code, both of them should be scanned. And automated, of course, because you're automating everything, right? If you're running containers, don't run your own infrastructure unless you absolutely have to. If you're in the cloud, Kubernetes is on some cloud platforms, coming to another one. EKS exists, it works, we use it, it's stable, it's awesome. No secrets, no certs in your containers. Don't put them there, that's not where they belong. They belong in some sort of store, HashiCorp Vault, AWS Parameter Store, some sort of store specifically for that stuff, not in your containers. So there's two slides on this. The first one is do create your own user. Don't run things as root. That's the second slide. So what's going on here is this container is getting its own user specifically for the application. And what's going on here is we're telling that container image to use that user and not run as root. Because things that run as root in a container run as root on your OS. Bad things happen. Let that sink in for a minute. Pay attention to your image sizes. If you've got big images, they're going to take a long time to build. They're going to take a long time to deploy. If you can make them smaller, your builds will go faster, your deploys will go faster, your rollbacks will go faster, everybody will be happier, guaranteed. Harden. You have to harden your machines, harden your images. CIS has some benchmarks. I'm sure you've heard of them. Very smart people who have very big text on their website. It's very easy to read. It's nice, for an old guy like me especially. Multi-stage builds. One of the coolest things to ever happen to Docker are multi-stage builds, especially if you are like this person and you have to build something with Go. You need all these things to compile, but you end up with this nice small binary. Why would you ship all your compile tools? You don't need to, multi-stage. Best practices. I'm making some up for you here, but lots of really smart people have documented these. Go and read them. You will learn a ton. I learn something every time I read pretty much anything, fortunately, but resource limits. By default, there aren't any, and you don't want your containers taken off and running away and doing anything they want. At the very least, set some CPU and memory caps so that things don't get out of control if something goes wrong, because you know what? In the real world, things go wrong. Read-only file systems. If you're doing stateless things in your containers like you should be when you're getting started, you should also be able to run those as a read-only file system, which means if something goes wrong, somebody breaks into your container somehow, they can't write to anything except what you've defined. Last but not least, logging. Pay attention to it. Hardest thing I did wrong getting started was not centralizing my logs. My developers hated me for a long time. There's lots of tooling to do that now. Make sure you're doing it. You'll be very, very happy, and so will your engineers. And that's it. Thanks.